Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for March 4th, 2020. Item number 1, if we could call the roll.
Councilmember Brennan.
Here.
Councilmember Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Mars.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
Councilmember Contreras is absent.
Thank you. If we could all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Any changes, Mr. Reynolds?
Mr. Mayor, just one. We'd like to move 9A2 to the position of 6A, and that's the presentation by the City of Savage.
With courtesy to the City of Savage. Any other changes, Councilor Lehman?
Do we want to move up the youth access tag community center presentation too, since there's somebody here for that?
Move that up? Okay, we'll move that up to 6B. Councilor Whiting.
Make a motion to adopt the resolution as modified, or the agenda.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 4, consent agenda. Any changes, Mr. Reynolds?
Nothing from staff, sir.
And councilors? Councilor Lehman?
Remove 4A4.
Okay. Others? Councilor Lehman?
Move the consent agenda as modified.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Brennan. Before we vote then, we would read the modified consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. These are the consent agenda items for March 4th of 2020. 4A1 approves renewal of the consumption and display license for Dilemma Brewing Company doing business as Shakopee Brew Hall. 4A2 approves the minutes from the February 18th, 2020 meeting. 4A3 adopts resolution number R2020 TAC 022, which appoints individuals to various boards and commissions. 4A5 approves appointment of Councilor Angelica Contreras to the city's equity team. 4B1 adopts resolution number R2020 TAC 019, which authorizes the submission of a Federal Emergency Management Agency Assistance to Firefighters grant application. 4C1 approves a temporary on-sale liquor license to the City of Shakopee Parks and Recreation Department for the NHL alumni event to be held at the Shakopee Ice Arena on April 11th of 2020. Tickets are still available. 4D1 adopts resolution number R2020 TAC 021, which sets a public hearing for the vacation of a portion of the Veerling Drive right-of-way in West Shakopee Gateway, First Edition. 4E1 approves a cleaning contract with Treasure Enterprise Incorporated in the amount of $34,880.31 for the annual park restroom cleaning services. 4E2 approves a drainage and utility encroachment agreement for 1369 Danita Drive. 4E3 accepts a Scott County subgrant program participation and funding and authorizes execution of the recycling program agreement. 4E4 adopts resolution number R2020 TAC 017, which approves plans and orders the advertisement for bids for the 12th Avenue Trail Project, which is CIF TAC 20 TAC 003. And 4E5 authorizes the execution of a cooperative agreement with Scott County for trail preventive maintenance.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much. I have a motion for the modified consent agenda and a second. The consent agenda has been read into the public record. There would be no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Item number 5. Now I'd like to call on any resident that would like to come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome on an item not on the agenda. Seeing none, we would move ahead then to business removed from consent. And that was 4A4. Counselor Lehman.
Mr. Mayor, the resolution, I guess I wanted to speak about the actual action that the utility took, modifying their pilot, I guess it's called. The rationale and what their intention was, we know that 23.77, I'll say 24% for easier, make it easier, 24% of their water sales go to the city and 2.7% of electricity. And with that much coming out of the water operation fund, it's making it hard on that fund to maintain any longevity. So from the utilities perspective to fix that deficiency in that fund, their rationale was to increase the electrical side, lowering the water side, and the intention was to not have a negative impact on the city, not have a negative impact on the water users, and fix the long-term health of the water operational fund. I'm convinced that their intention was not ill-intended. So I'm not necessarily against that action. Actually, I think it was probably a good action. I haven't heard any other alternatives. But at the same token, I certainly would like to see a judge make a ruling on whether they have the authority to unilaterally make that action. And I'd like to see that happen sooner rather than later. I actually don't. I don't like the fact that we're almost putting it out there like either do this or we're going to do this. I would just assume we go right to a judge and get a determination. At least everybody knows where everything stands. And I just wanted to say that.
Okay. I watch a lot of tape and again watched last Monday's Utility Commission and a lot of discussion about the money and how the formula has to be changed to protect the water fund. And I guess there's a lot of discussion about money. I don't believe this. I know money's involved, but I think the crux of what we're trying to do is that this pilot is by agreement. And they took action, and we're asking to rescind that action. And maybe we can get to an agreement. If not, we're going to take some legal action. But it's about whether the premise of, is it under agreement? There was a document that was put out today by the utility, and in that document, 3 times it says the money contribution is voluntary to the utility, to the city, not by contract. 3 times. Actually, I go even farther back to July 15th, Shakopee Valley News has a direct quote from one of the commissioners. Commissioner Meyer said that he does not believe Shakopee Public Utilities is obligated to give any money to the city. And I think that I have always believed that this pilot is under agreement. There was some discussion in 2009 about exploring the opportunity to change that pilot. It was a commission discussion at the utility. Actually, in hindsight now, I look back and maybe they wanted to adjust it there because of the percentage of the water, but maybe we should have, at that time, looked at a combination in moving rates up as well. But I firmly believe we are operating under agreement as it was changed last time in 2001, and the prior times there were adjustments. And that's, like you said, are we by agreement? Is the pilot by agreement?
Mayor, I just refer to the response you received in your email to the utility from their finance director that said they have the authority to make this change without the city's participation. And that's why I beg the question, when two different sides are reading laws differently,
Yeah.
it's time for a judge to make a determination.
Well, and I think even on Monday's meeting, the Shakopee utility manager, John Crook, said, well, our attorney and the city's attorney and the utilities attorney have agreed to disagree. And that puts us right in that spot about the agreement. And I'm aware, I think we're all aware of the email put out by the finance director, but if it's not by agreement, then the utility could raise or lower that agreement or bring it to zero at any time. And that actually brings the question of what is the purpose of a public utility?
Well, after thinking through this a little further, it dawned on me that even if we were to meet and come up with some kind of a new agreement, there will be future challenges on what authority boundaries exist. So it seems to me that the best way to prevent future issues is just to find out what the boundaries are right up front.
Counselor Brennan?
I feel that this is an action that would stop, that is based on an action versus a dollar amount. And I think it puts it in the hands of the utilities to make the decision how they legally want to go forward with it. All we're saying is that we want them to rescind 1261 and then meet with us to discuss this. And if they don't want to meet, then we need to move forward. It's in their hands. If they want to, go a legal direction, then that's up to them.
Okay.
Counselor Lehman?
And I'm trying to figure out how do I separate the two, because I actually agree with the changes that they've made, but I would like to see a judge rule on it.
Okay, so our city attorney told us the last time that if we went to a judge and he ruled, I think he had some,
Well, I don't know that we can,
Well, Mr. Mayor, maybe I can help here. The reason we drafted the resolution the way it is that judges don't rule on hypothetical questions. In other words, if Spark were to rescind their resolution, and if you were to enter into an agreement in a different fashion, you couldn't bring a lawsuit because the judge is, just to see what the judge says, because the judge is going to say, there's no dispute, they reached an agreement. So that's why we drafted it the way we are, to give Spark a chance to rescind it so they can
Counselor Lehman?
reach an
but couldn't we
agreement.
just go right to a judge now saying their action was unilateral action? They're not authorized to take unilateral action?
Yes, you could do that without giving him an opportunity to rescind it. I think a better approach is to give him a chance to do it, so the judge sees, if you have to bring a lawsuit, the judge sees you gave them a chance to do it before you brought the lawsuit. I just think it's a better procedural way to do that.
Counselor Whiting, did you want to weigh in?
I agree with both of you. I think the discussion is not on, whether or not Spuck needed to make that adjustment in their financing on their side. The thing is that they unilaterally made that decision without mutual negotiations and agreement. And I think you used the term agreement, but it's mutual agreement. And I think that's the most important thing, that we just had time to discuss it and talk.
I guess I have one last question, and this may be for the attorney. If we challenge the unilateral decision itself and won on that merit all by itself, wouldn't it warrant them going back and rescinding it?
Mr. Mayor, yes, if you were to just bring a lawsuit and the judge were to rule it was improper for them to do it, the judge would probably order them to rescind it.
Okay.
Counselor Whiting?
I think with the history and the back and forth that the city and the public utility has had, the judge is going to ask us to go into some sort of negotiation before we go to court on that. So with that, I would offer a resolution R 2020-020, a resolution rejecting Shakopee Public Utility Commission's modification to the method of calculating the amount of commission's payment to the city.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Then that gives them about 25, 26 days to take action, and then, all right, Counselor Lehman?
How do I vote in favor of having a judge make a decision, but supporting the changes that they made for the reasons that they've stated?
I'm sorry, could you,
Well, the actual action that they took, I think it was a good decision. The question in my mind is whether they had the authority to unilaterally make that decision or not.
well, I think,
I'm almost, it's almost like, okay, if we actually did sit down and negotiate, we would end up at this, probably the same decision. At least that would seem fair to me.
I think that would come up in
20
any conversations that we had with them.
24.
And if we came up with that agreement with them, there you go.
And then we have the issue of future challenges to authority on any other issues.
well, the whole idea here, and, you know, in all my years on the commission, never did I think we could act without city agreement. Also, we have how many council members and an attorney? I guess the attorney feels they can, there is no agreement, but I'm a little surprised that the commission, or the members feel that there's no need for a mutual agreement. And that, you know, trying to get to that bottom. They did take action, so our resolution is asking them to rescind their non-mutual agreement that they did unilaterally of 1261, and that would get us back to our old resolution by mutual agreement, basis point, and then move ahead if they don't, and we would find out where a judge lies on that.
It just seems, Mayor, it just seems to me that if by rescinding that action, you're basically supporting the city receiving 24% of water sales, and that seems like an ungodly number to me. I don't know how it ever got there to begin with, but whatever. I mean, it is what it is.
Well,
And it's basically saying you increase your water rates to the citizens of Shakopee to shore up your operation fund.
well, maybe if it became a mutual agreement, you know, for the payment in lieu of taxation pilot, maybe that fee would be a percentage of overall revenues. I think really, years ago, one of the driving forces of the utility was water. And water is typically a enterprise fund within a city or an agency like the utility. I think that how they came up with that at that number, we can't answer because of Bob Sweeney.
Right.
How that, but I know that at that time, it was agreed upon, mutually agreed upon that that was the calculation. Times have changed. And maybe that formula and those percentages, maybe it should be the utility, and obviously their power has grown exponentially. You know, this is a $55 million enterprise. So, but I certainly would like it. I believe it's always been under mutual agreement. And whether I was on the commission or here on this board. Councilor Brennan.
Item number 2 of the resolution states that the city council requests that the commission rescind 1261 so that the city and commission can engage in discussions and hopefully agree to changes in the formula in which the commission's payment to the city is calculated and the amount of the commission's payment. So if that's an agreement, that's the amount is an agreement that is between, what?
Item number 2, is that what you read?
Yep.
Okay. Motion on the table and
I
a,
just, I know I don't believe in this, but I just want to make it clear that nothing in this resolution would prevent the city council from ultimately agreeing with the commission on the method of the contribution. That's exactly what they've already adopted. This doesn't prevent you from ultimately agreeing to that. I just want to make that clear.
Maybe the question, Mayor, if I may, maybe the question should be, why are we not agreeing with these changes that they've made? What other alternatives would you like to see?
Counselor
I
Brennan.
think the issue is that we were not involved in the agreement.
Okay.
We should be. We haven't been involved in the agreement. We haven't been involved in the calculation, and we should be involved in this. And that's where the issue
Counselor
lies.
That's the precedent we don't want to set.
Further discussion? 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 All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye, and I'm in favor of having a judge decide if they can take unilateral action on pilot or not. But I think the decision and the rationale of why they came to that decision was a good one.
We may get a judge.
Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
6A.
Let's move ahead then to item 6A, which is actually the old 9A2 presentation by the fine city of Savage regarding rail transportation. And Brad Larson here to present. Welcome to Shakopee.
Thank you, Mayor and council members and City Administrator Reynolds. I really like your new building here. It looks great. I'm here to talk to you tonight to bring your attention to our river crossings here in Scott County. As you know, our river crossings are over capacity at peak times right now. Not that they're projected to be, they will be, continue in the future, but currently at peak times, they're not operating the way they should be. And 45% of our workforce drives across these river crossings to Hennepin County, Minneapolis, Golden Valley, Bloomington to go to work. And so I say northern Scott County, so that includes Shakopee, Prior Lake, Savage. When you take into account all of Scott County, that number goes above 50%. And when I looked at this information, I put it together. These are the people that were going to, like I said, Hennepin County, so it's Minneapolis, Bloomington, Edina, Eden Prairie. I did not count the folks that were going to St. Paul, Vadnais Heights, et cetera. So they're likely using 169 and 101, probably a little bit of 35 too, but the issue here is that 101 or 169 is over capacity right now. So is 41. My main concerns are the ones going straight north, but 169 is over capacity right now. 101 is projected to be at over capacity. In the next 20 years, Scott County is going to be adding 50,000 people to its population. And the odds are most of those will be coming to Shakopee, Savage, and Prior Lake. So they're just going to contribute to that issue. And we do not have solutions on the table to address the congestion at our river crossings. And I'm sure that this council knows that Savage has been advocating for the repeal of the Dan Patch gag order for quite some time now, and this is exactly the reason why. You know, some people say that it's un-American. It is, but the issue is that it's a quality of life issue, and it's an economic development issue. People are not going to want to locate here in Scott County if they can't get across the river to their jobs. So I put together a couple maps here. You know, I should state that there's a bill in the hopper right now, House File 1493, that would fund the study of the Central Minnesota Rail Corridor. So what this is that there is a rail corridor in the state rail plan that it uses the Dan Patch line, but it's much bigger than the Dan Patch line. And it would study the cost of that. So what it would take to put in the rail crossings to improve the rail, et cetera, the rail that's already there. So I have some maps here that will kind of illustrate my discussion, if I can get through here. So I fully recognize that this is a bad map. This comes from the Scott County's comprehensive plan for 2040. And if you had magnifying vision, you would see that right now, existing daily traffic volumes, 169 is over capacity, so is 41. 101 is here sitting okay. So in 2040, with all of the millions of dollars that the Scott County plans to put into their transportation system, 169 will continue to be over capacity, so will 41, and then 101 becomes over capacity as well. So what this looks for, or what this looks like in Savage is in the mornings, the approach to 169 is congested for over 2 hours. And that backs up down around the corner to 13 South. And on the 13 corridor, you can see that it creates delays and it creates safety issues along the Highway 13 corridor. I'm not sure what it's like going from Shakopee up 169, but there's a hill that looks down onto the 169 overpass here, and you can see the parked cars that go down around to Highway 13 South.
I see it every morning when I come west on 101 to access that about 6 o'clock every single morning during the weekday, and I see those lineups of cars coming west and going north.
And this slide comes from a MnDOT presentation that the City Council of Savage just recently had at one of their meetings, because we're looking at ways to improve the congestion on Highway 13, but is not addressing the river crossings here. So what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be making traffic go through Highway 13 here much more efficiently, and the problem in the mornings and then in the evenings is that they're just going to bottleneck at 169. So these are some of the comments that MnDOT gave to us. You can see that obviously we have congestion. Our intersections have higher crashes on average, and it's not efficient or safe for our over average freight traffic that uses Highway 13. And then of course there's virtually no pedestrian or bicycle traffic along Highway 13 because that would be suicide. So this is the corridor that House File 1493 would like to study. This is a priority one on the state rail plan. So some of you may ask, I thought there was a gag order on the Dan Patch line, so how are they able to do this? Well, the idea is that this is a lot bigger than the Dan Patch line that we've been talking about over the past several years. This takes into account Northfield, Farmington, St. Paul. It creates a loop there. What we'd like is that this would pass this legislative session, and would provide $500,000 to study those types of things. Again, this is just a study. We don't feel like this is a silver bullet. This is not an all or nothing. We don't feel like rail is the solution or be-all, end-all solution. It needs to be all solutions. We still need to do something with our river crossings at 169 and 101, but this is just an alternative to relieve some of that congestion. So my ask for this city council tonight is that you help support when we need it. This is still going to the Capital Investment Committee in the House. We don't have a date on that yet, so we're still waiting to see what when we get a date and what the conversation is at that point. And then also, really, I think the bigger thing is just to be aware of this and start talking about this, because this is an issue that's going to take a heavy lift. We've been talking about it for years. Even if we get a solution on the table, it's going to take years to implement and advocate for that funding. So that's my ask from the City Council. And I appreciate you having me here, inviting me to talk, and that's all the information I have unless you have questions of me.
Councilor Lehman.
What's on the screen here in blue and orange, it says on they're existing rail lines?
Correct. These are existing rail lines. The Dan Patch rail was actually built as a passenger rail back in 1917, I believe it was. So these are all existing rail lines. They would not be building anything new. The money that would be needed is to fix the rail up because some of it has not been used for a while, and then improve those intersections of the rail crossings.
So where the blue one crosses the river, that's in Savage, and that's the old turn bridge?
That's the old turn bridge in Savage, correct.
Brad, thank you. Can just basic question that this presentation and this bill that you mentioned is not subject to the gag order?
We don't think it is.
All right,
We're
that's
moving
fine.
forward with it.
Yeah,
Like I said, this is a priority 1 rail corridor in the state rail plan. So the gag order says that you can't, the state can't spend money on it, MnDOT can't spend money on it. But this has been talked about. It's in a state plan, so we do not believe that this applies to the gag order.
that would be great. I think capacity in any style would serve the metro area, our region, and actually you have this all the way down to Northfield. Big important issue in that, 169, 101, 41. If they only would have built that other bridge a long time ago, but.
Yeah, we agree.
Counselor-
And with Northern Scott County, with our tourist attractions here in Scott County, we know that Amazon and Mystic are already using the bus system to take employees from north in Minneapolis to bring them down. We feel that there's pent-up demand for this.
Counselor Whiting.
Well, you're right, we have talked about this for years and had the gag order put on it longer, many more years before that, but we have to start looking at solutions, so when it does come time to need those resolutions of support, please make sure you forward it on, and we'll do what we can.
Thank you.
Counselor Brennan?
I want to thank you for coming. I know that this is a scale-approved conversation that is being had, and I had a chance to attend the meetings and hear more information in depth. And the fact is that the line actually goes all the way down to Kansas. Is that right?
It can, yeah, it can go
And
through
so
Kansas.
the conversation was about how that would affect Shakopee in the entertainment area, and I thought it was pretty exciting to hear about. So I want to really thank you for
No,
coming.
thank you, and thank you for your past support, because Shakopee has passed resolutions support.
We're all in
support
it
the
together.
past, so.
Counselor Lehman has a question for you.
Well, it's a comment. One of the concerns I've always had with the state on transportation in general is the analogy is the same as, okay, you can't afford to maintain the house you currently own, should you go buy a second home? They don't maintain and improve the existing infrastructure that they have to serve the needs, but yet we're asking them to start a whole new capital endeavor. I'm confident, based on that if they can't afford to maintain this, if they build this over here, now they can't afford to maintain either. Always a concern.
Great presentation, and thank you for being here and presenting tonight, Brad.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Let's move ahead then. We are going to move to 6B, which is our previous 9B1, which is our youth access TAG at our Shakopee Community Center. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Did you tell the city administrator that he has to stay till the meeting is adjourned, or?
Mr. Mayor and Council, this evening we have a proposal before you for a youth access tag that is going to help us resolve what has been a long-standing problem in our operations at the community center. We've had some challenges in ensuring that the teens are behaving appropriately, that we can keep them safe, and there's some other nuances to it. And so quarterbacking this idea is Amber Cunningham. I've asked her to be here this evening. She's worked in the teen center for 6 years. And then for the last 2 months, we just brought her on board full-time, and she is our evening guest services supervisor that supervises the teen center. And she's quarterbacked this plan. We had an idea as staff, and then when she came on board, we said, okay, you've got a lot of experience with this. Help us figure out how to implement this. And so this is her proposed plan, and we are excited for what she's done here. So, Amber.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. To get started, the Youth Access Tag is a free tag that is similar to our membership cards. It will allow teens 6th through 12th grade to access our facility. Do you guys have any questions at all? No?
Questions, Counselor Lehman?
I'm reading the top of this form, and it's address or the townships. Does this apply to anybody, any teen that comes to our teen center?
Yes,
It
so
does?
it is going to apply to both residents and non-residents.
Okay.
And to be clear, Councilman Lehman, it's specifically for teens that want to access the facilities unaccompanied by an adult who are not members of the community center.
Correct.
And do they, Mayor, if I may, do they fill this out with an adult, with their parent or guardian?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that that person then is aware of what the rules are also. Okay. All right, and I think I read somewhere, Mayor, if I can, somewhere in here that certain access portions are free and other access portions are $5 or something?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So you can, with a TIG, I could go into the teen center, but I would have to buy a daily pass if I wanted to access the pool or the gym or,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
If I was a non-member, and, right?
Yep.
I applaud your effort here. I know that we talked a year ago or so about, you know, understanding who's in our building. And I think that is important. And this is a great way that we can do that. I think we have a lot of features that are draws for folks, and I think that's certainly a benefit, but if it's a sign-in sheet where they just scribble their name, we're not getting good, accurate information. And this is a good way to understand really who's in our building at when. Counselor Brennan?
I understand that there's a picture that's taken of the child, and so that you know that that's who it
That's
is.
their, yep, then that's their card. So it's
Okay.
similar to our membership cards where they also get their picture taken. So if anyone else tried to use their card, we would know that that's not acceptable, so.
Okay, so if the child tries to go into the community center area, that would be stopped at the front desk, is that correct? And they would know that that child did not have the correct card?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep. So there will be two different scanners, one in the teen center where they scan in when they go in there, and then the other one would be the same scanner that we use for our members currently.
Counselor Whiting?
No, thank you. I appreciate this effort. I know there has been some concerns with some of the behavior at the teen center and things. I think once you've given a teen a card that they put their name on it, and that anonymity created probably a lot of the issues. So now that they've signed in, we know who you are, kind of thing. I think it's great. So I think the teen center has been a great service and a place for teens to be active and meet people and stay out of trouble, I guess. And so that's the goal, and I'd like to keep it that way. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Of course, of
I
course.
have a general question. So
Yes.
the application was in our packet, and then there was a desk drop of a, are they both the same?
It's the same, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, no changes. Further questions?
Mayor, I just have two more.
Counselor Lehman?
Is there any software enhancements that we need for our system to do this?
No.
No? And have we anticipated any cons that we might have to address as we roll this through?
Implementation is going to be challenging
Yes.
because trying to get all those kids, I mean, we're talking 30 to 60 kids. It's going to, that's why we're giving ourselves a month. This has been posted that this may be coming for a while, so our customers are aware. But doing the legwork is going to take some time.
Is there a charge for the initial?
No.
Okay,
Only if they lose it.
Yes, correct. If they lose it within 1 year of obtaining the card, then it's a $5 fee to get a new one.
Mr. Reynolds?
So why are we specifically doing this?
So this is more for our safety, for the teens that are coming and using our facility, and the rest of the patrons. So we know who's in the facility, if they have parental permission, and that we have accurate emergency contact information on record for these teens. Also just for customer service and good order too.
Goes right along with public safety.
So specifically, the catalyst for this discussion was I can talk about 3 specific instances, one of safety, in which we were contacted by a parent with a runaway child who thought that their child was at the community center. In fact, the child had been at the community center but used a false name. So we had no way to verify that the child was there. So for safety in that regard, trying to communicate with parents if we have any emergencies that happen, they put down false numbers, and we have no way to contact an adult to ensure the safety of the child if they get injured on our facility or if they're misbehaving. And then the third one, just trying to make sure we have a baseline of understanding so that if we have a violation, we want parents to be involved in the conversation. And in some instances, it's taken us weeks, almost months, in order to get that contact information, having to work with the SROs in order to identify the kids. So that's that side of thing. Another thing in terms of safety for all of our patrons, we had a couple of non-Shakopee teens come into the teen center early summer, and they used false names when they signed in and got a drop pass, and they stole from our customers. They stole wallets, and they also tried to steal a car. We were able to prevent them before they stole the car. It took the police quite a while to try and identify who they were. We didn't know who was in the building. We had no way to track them down. So this solves that problem for any unaccompanied teen.
Great. Counselor Lehman.
Last question, it just dawned on me, but hypothetically, if we had somebody doing some vandalism to our facility, caught on surveillance, would we be able to match that surveillance to pictures to figure out who it was?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Excellent.
Good. If there's no further questions, thank you very much, both of you, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Great. Counselor Brennan?
I'd like to make a motion to approve implementation of the youth access tag at the community center, Shakopee Community Center.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Lehman. Further discussion? Discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So, now I would entertain a motion to recess to the EDA. Counselor Lehman.
Motion to recess to the Shakopee Economic Development Authority meeting.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to recess to the EDA. Discussion, discussion, discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We are in recess. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's call the March 4th meeting of the Shakopee Economic Development Authority to order. Please make note of the roll. First item would be the approval of the agenda. Mr. Lehman.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion and a second by Mr. Mars to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is the consent item, which includes the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion on the floor.
I'll second that.
Seconded by
Mr. President.
Mr. Mars. Any discussion on the minutes? Discussion, discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is discussion on the direction of the business subsidy number 4A. Mr. Kurski.
Good evening, Mr. President and board members. Around here. So we've had a lot of discussion over the past 3 months, and so we thought we'd bring this back to you to get some direction on the existing program that we currently have and look at some of the data that we've collected in the interim. So as of December 2019, you can see here Shakopee had a pretty low unemployment, 2.8%. That represents approximately 651 people that live in the city of Shakopee that are of work age that aren't working. So it's a pretty remarkable number. So total employment is 26,523. So that's up about almost 7,000 jobs over the past 5 years. You can see the breakdown. So private sector employment is the largest portion. Local government employment is the next piece, state government, and then federal employees. So Deed's office reports show an average industry wage here in Shakopee of about $56,000. So who are those people? What's the makeup? So You can see from this pie diagram, and these will become important as we go through this, but the areas highlighted in red may look small percentages, but you'll see that when they come to salaries and impact on the community, they're pretty important. The good news is that manufacturing, which you'll also see is a pretty high wage area, is a pretty significant for a community of Shakopee size. It's 18% of our employment. And so this is kind of an interesting diagram. So it's 2010 versus 2018. So you can see manufacturing's had some pretty significant growth. So these are 1,000, the number of jobs. So we went from just over 2,500 to over 4,000. The unfortunate thing we'll see in a minute is we had hardly any transportation and warehousing, and that's actually the largest occupation now in Shakopee. So median household income currently shows about $84,000. It's had a 5.97% growth. If you look at that kind of lower diagram, Scott County is higher than we are in general, and that's largely because of Prior Lake and Savage have higher incomes than we do. You can see down below that it's Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Bloomington are less than we are, and then we're higher than Minnesota overall, and actually much higher than the United States overall. So these are kind of the interesting breakdowns, and this is kind of, for the discussion tonight, we kind of have a mismatch, and a large portion of that's because of that transportation warehousing. So education required for occupancy in the jobs in Shakopee in 2018, so it was a high school diploma or no formal education, was almost 70% of the jobs here. Four-year college degree was only 19%, associate's degree was 10%, a graduate degree was only 2%. If you look at the adults that are in Shakopee, you can see 32% of our residents have high school diploma or no formal education, but 33% have some college, 26% have a four-year college degree, and 9% have graduate degrees. And so you say, well, there's some issue here. Well, the issue is only 4,200 of Shakopee residents work in Shakopee. So 17,900 residents commute to work primarily toward the Twin Cities. 16,900 workers commute to work in Shakopee from outside. So there's a pretty big mismatch here. And that leads to all sorts of issues, including transportation issues, because our residents basically are getting on 169 and leaving the community. To give you a percentage, it's about 80% of our residents leave Shakopee either for jobs in Scott County or outside of Scott County. So we look at employment trends in pretty long periods. So this is 2000 through 2017. You can see the bottom employment. If I can get this to work here. This is Shakopee starting in 2000. We had 13,000. We're up to 26,000. And then you can see Scott County stays slightly ahead of us. And this is the first time in a while you can see where the wage in Shakopee kind of matches basically what the wage has been in Scott County. So we've made some pretty good progress because of that really low unemployment rate that has driven up the hourly wage here. When I came here, I can remember some of the newer businesses were starting at $14 an hour. They are now $18 to $20 an hour and offering sign-on bonuses. So that shrinking labor pool has resulted in a pretty rapid increase in wages. So this is a interesting diagram because it really breaks down very fine the employment here in Shakopee. So if you look, the green ones are pretty healthy wages. So manufacturing, if you remember, you saw that had a big jump. The average annual wage today in Shakopee is $84,552 in the manufacturing sector. Construction, people knock construction jobs all the time. Well, guess what? It's $74,256. Those trades, their wages have gone up considerably over the past few years. It happens to be an industry where not a lot of people are going into it, and it's forced wages to increase. A lot of the baby boomers are starting to retire, and so they're having to pay a lot more money to keep employees. Wholesale trades, another area, 67,704. Public administration, which is basically government sector jobs, 61,256. And then if you look down, professional, scientific, and technical services, there's 936 jobs, $83,980. Those are some decent salaries. If you look, though, transportation and warehousing, which has been one of those big growing sectors, is $35,880. Retail trade, $30,000. Accommodation and food services, which is your restaurants and hotels, $17,000. And then arts, entertainment, and recreation, another big area here in Shakopee, is only $34,000. So you can see there's that kind of mismatch in jobs. And again, if you look here, the good news is the 2016-2017 job change, so 47.1% in the manufacturing sector. That's a pretty healthy gain, and again, those are good paying jobs. And then if you look at the wholesale trade, another 65.2%. But the bad news is transportation and warehousing, 104.5% increase. And that professional, scientific, and technical services, which are those graduate level jobs, we've lost some. There was actually a pretty big drop in those jobs in Shakopee. And the reason why this discussion kind of comes about is you look at your Shakopee's average house, so it's $272,600. With a $20,000 down payment, you're looking at a monthly mortgage with today's competitive rates at about $1,200 a month. When you add in monthly taxes, $308, you add in insurance and utilities, it's $1,808 monthly housing costs. So what do you need to cover that? So household income's about $65,000 to live in your kind of average house in Shakopee. So if you look at our past business subsidies, tax increment, which are direct payments to the companies, Challenge Printing, which is now Imagine Print Solutions, Open Systems, Sanmar, and RAR, all got actually TIF agreements where they're actually getting their cash back to the company. And then the tax abatements were DataCard, Rosemont, Emerson, Shutterfly, KEB America, and Cherney. And you can see here, if you remember, KEB America had some of those scientific and professional jobs. And so hopefully this big addition that you see under construction is going to help us improve that number over the next 2 years. So if you look at industry clusters for the city of Shakopee, this was something actually we just got today. So this is about, if I can get this to show up here, this bottom line is $50 an hour roughly. And this is zero line. If you're below 1, you're below kind of the national average, so 1 is kind of a balance. If you look over on the left side, these are the jobs that are kind of in trouble. So electronics manufacturing is a pretty high location quotient for us, 4.7. So those are companies like Seagate and others here that are in the electronic manufacturing industry. They're challenged today because of foreign competition and offshoring. And then media companies, I don't think we need to have a lot of discussion. That's changing pretty quickly. We have a lot of big printers here. Printing industry is going through a pretty big shakeup right now. And then textile and leather, we have some jobs here. That's another industry that's going away pretty quickly. If you look kind of above the line, pharmaceutical, we're pretty high. Those are high-paying jobs. Those are some of our foreign companies that we have here. So Bayer and others that have a lot of scientists on staff. And there's some other companies located here. The professional services, we're pretty low on that. One's kind of the national equilibrium. We're at 0.57, so there's a lot of potential here for growth. So these are Scott County's target industry. These are the ones, the First Stop Shop in Scott County are out promoting. So it's manufacturing, warehouse and distribution, wholesale trade, transportation, logistics, data centers, research and development, corporate headquarters, tourism and entertainment. So that's the list that the county has adopted that they're out pursuing. And these are their eligible incentives by target industry type. So you can see, except for tourism and entertainment, data centers and corporate headquarters, there's pretty much a lot of incentives available. So that's kind of what the city had been working on over the years. We were using Scott County. These are the businesses that we've actually been working with and that actually have a lot of interest in Shakopee and that we would propose for discussion or potential targets for the city to go after. So advanced manufacturing, people ask, what is that? That's something where it requires a much higher skill level. So computer programming, those are robotic industries. And it's interesting, Deed just today announced a statewide training program for advanced manufacturing because they see that as what's going to start happening to a lot of the O-line manufacturing in Minnesota. It's going to have fewer jobs, but much higher paying because things are being automated. Research and development, we have a lot of that here now. That's another area I think that's got some great potential. Corporate headquarters, both of the companies that you gave tax abatements to are corporate headquarters. And then just overall, looking at companies that are leaders and innovators in their industry so that we're not kind of on the downward side of the curve, but looking for companies that have the potential for both wage increase and potential increase in the number of jobs. So a lot of discussion over the past 6 months on wage. So we've talked around the office and talked to other cities. Is one of our goals maybe 80% wage to afford an average house? Do we look, instead of averaging, we look at the midpoint? Because let's just say you picked a number and it was $30 an hour. They're not going to pay the person that cleans the restrooms $30 an hour. They're going to be somewhere on the right, but they're going to have hopefully a lot of other jobs if the midpoint is some number that are on the other side of that, because it would be the midpoint. The average number of jobs is what we've been using, and we've been asking them to exclude the C-level jobs of the company because they tend to skew the average. So if you have a lot of jobs that are $20 an hour and you have 3 or 4 that are $150,000, it screws the average all up. So all of the companies that have been coming in, we've asked them to pull those out when they give us their payroll and to take those C-level jobs out because they do skew the average way too high. Look at what their currently per hour wage is. And then the other thing we need to look at, probably more in depth, are benefits that are offered. So I'll use example, my wife probably is below what our average is here, but her company heavily subsidizes their benefits. So basically on the medical side, she pays nothing for prescriptions, doctor visits, and other things. And so every year they shell out basically what their benefit cost is. And for her company, their average cost is about $30,000 per employee because they have a lot of medical people and such working at the company. She's in a research and development company. And so while they don't pay that high, to keep those people there, they give really significant benefits. So that's one of the things we really haven't looked at, and we'd recommend as we discuss this policy, that's something we should be looking at is, are they giving the bare minimum or are they really giving a robust benefit plan? Because either it goes into the salary or it goes into the benefits. In our current policy, there's a whole housing discussion. Just talking, I think we should probably pull that out and have a separate housing policy if you wish, and talk about what the incentives could be. Some people in the community have been talking about land trusts, providing bonding and other ideas, but I think that's a separate discussion from the actual business subsidy.
I found your data that you just presented. It's just new to us, the PowerPoint, and, but there's some great data on here for our community, and really shows, number one, that we're the leader here in Scott County on over half the jobs, right, in all of Scott County.
Yep. And Mayor, I just want to say, I want to thank Greater MSP and Deed on Jen Brewington, who's our economic development specialist, has spent a couple of weeks working with them to start and pull this data together. Some of this, literally just one of these diagrams came over today because they've been working on it for a couple of weeks.
Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just wanted to frame this for you. You know, this is just, frankly, the start of a conversation, if you wish. We know that we've given you a lot of data here. You know, we'd like to kind of have that conversation, start it, work through it, come back with a policy, then obviously for you to critique it and see if we're doing what you would like to have done. But nothing should be decided at this particular meeting. This is just the beginning of the conversation. We wanted to make sure that you had the data to start framing the issues.
Councilor Whiting?
Thank you. I will make some comments on some of the projects that you've talked about. I like the idea. I wrote down some of these targeted ideas first, and then, that's right, But I wrote them down, then you added a couple more that I added to it. But I had manufacturing, the professional, scientific, and the corporate headquarters down that I thought would be something that would be great to target. And then the R&D I added, I think that makes a lot of sense too. I would like to get away from incentivizing moving jobs from other suburbs, I prefer the new jobs, but I understand that sometimes that's going to happen, like in the last case we had. I also like the idea of enhancing the downtown. So if it's a project that's going to try and fit downtown somehow, I think that may be another focus area. But I like the idea also that you mentioned, because benefits are so varied and all over the board. If a company does come with extraordinary benefits, I think that's something we should look at. But that would have to be maintained throughout the life of the abatement or TIF. So just some thoughts.
And Mr. President, board members, one of the things we do try to work with is with deeds. So we have a pretty good relationship with both they and Greater MSP. And so if you remember, I think when I came 3 or 3.5 years ago, there was a big battle that Greater MSP was moving and challenging companies on incentives to move from city to city. That has completely stopped, and they're not working on that anymore. However, Deed finds out. So Turney's a good example. That company could have moved out of state without any problem. There was really no, except for the quality of workers they had right now, reason to stay. Jen and I spoke to a company on Friday that's currently in the region, and potentially down the road could be 1,000 jobs, but they're also looking at South Dakota and a couple other locations. I think that Deed's been pretty helpful to let us know that there's companies looking here, but they have other options. And I think to lose those high-paying jobs, companies are very fluid these days and are willing to locate other places. So we're trying to keep as many jobs as we can, even in the region.
Understood.
Mr. President, the part about education, and then later on you said something about deed training. I think, the more education in specifically into specific industries there, that ties right in with our innovation center, Shakopee U. I think that also helps with retention, which is important. Also, I think in the long run, I'm a firm believer that manufacturing carries a much higher tax capacity and value for the community than a warehouse that has, they're just storing things. I like your concept of innovators, best in class. And thinking outside of the box, I know we've incentivized a couple companies to come here for higher paying jobs and things like that, and that's great. And if we start moving our standard up to get even bigger and better companies, I think that's great. But it'd be great to have some sort of policy to how long they stay here. I was talking to another mayor about a month ago, and they incentivized a company a bunch of years ago, and then the incentive ran out, and the company played the game again, and against another community. So just looking at that, and that's one of the things about Turney that I brought up. They've been in that Edina location for over 40 years, and when I knew the founding father there, but trying to get a business that's going to come here, they need a help to come, but then they're going to be here for the long show. So, and also I think it ties directly into our strategic plan that we're talking about, and trying to look at some metrics in the middle to say, here's what we want, how are we going to get there, and how are we going to measure it. So those are my comments, Mr. President.
Mr. President, board members, so one of the interesting things through the innovation feasibility study that's ongoing right now, they've kind of identified that Shakopee has the potential to kind of be a hub for some of these businesses. And in speaking with the school district, they kind of like that concept. So they have the academies. When you get out of the academy, you actually go to a hub. And there's some huge potential from both on marketing and also from programs that could be established there by kind of creating the idea. We had a discussion today. Everyone hears about clusters in industry. That's kind of going out of vogue pretty quickly because, for instance, when I was in South Carolina, the automotive industry was the largest cluster. So there were 235 companies supplying BMW, Volvo in Charleston, and then in VW in Tennessee. The issue is when that industry has a hiccup, it kind of hurts everybody. So the new kind of motive, so advanced manufacturing could be a lot of different things, could be medical, could be company that makes signs, whatever the best and brightest kind of technology is. Since it's all computer related and they're using all kind of high-tech machinery and you get laid off, you can go work at another company because you have those skills for programming. So to try and find companies that are similar industries to locate in your community is good. So KEB, if they ever had to lay someone off, maybe they then go work at Cherney to try and keep the people in your community so you don't have this constant ups and downs. And I think Shakopee's been lucky over the years that, unlike a lot of other communities where something happens in the economy and all of a sudden they're shutting buildings down, people can move around. I mean, I think the print industry is a really good example. We lost a major print facility here. Well, those people went to work at some of our other printers, but that, again, as you saw in that chart, is an industry that's rapidly compressing because of digital technology. So that's something we just need to be careful of, where they fall on kind of that diagram. Are they on the upward side or are they going on the downward side?
Right. Mr. Lehman, did you have something to add?
Thanks, Mr. President. A couple of thoughts. I tend to agree with Mr. Whiting about moving jobs from one community next door to us to our community or vice versa. When you start pitting them against each other, it doesn't help the region as a whole. The other thoughts that I have is, you know, if we're going to subsidize a job that doesn't make enough money to where we're going to have taxpayers subsidize other parts of their life, we're really not gaining anything. So I think the wages are going to have to be looked at along with the benefits. I think the benefit package should be looked at and considered. But I think that benefit package has to be, if it's being utilized as part of the rationale for considering, then it has to be, if it's, you know, a 9-year something, it has to be guaranteed for that period of time also. I also have a problem with somebody, as your slideshow shows, maybe it's 80% of the median wage, you know, trying to have their first house, and then they're subsidizing somebody else's household when they can barely make it on their own. I think it's counterproductive to the housing market. So somehow we got to figure out how we don't hurt. I mean, how do you tell somebody that's trying to make their own household work that they get to subsidize somebody else's household?
And Mr. President, board members, I think one of the things we're just trying to be careful of, so when I came, I think I got raised at $19.56 or $20 an hour, and that was the headline in the Star Tribune. I think when companies see that, no one else, we looked at all the other communities, nobody uses a dollar, they're using a percentage of the median income, or they're using an index median income so that it's not $1 per hour, because I think people think, well, I'm not going to come to Shakopee. I've got to pay everybody $20 an hour, because that was the way it was pitched. And they go, I'm not paying the guy that's, you know, sweeping my floors $20 an hour. I'm going to pay him 18 or whatever. I want to be able to decide that. I think deciding where that line kind of falls to make sure we've got plenty of jobs on both ends, I think is the more important part.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chair, and I'm kind of against, you know, government stepping in and trying to run a business for a business. You know, if they can't make it on their own, should taxpayers stand them up? When I also don't understand why we would subsidize this business with the revenue from their direct competitor. It seems like a competitive advantage to one over the other. So from my perspective, it has to be a pretty good deal for me to support it.
And Mr. President, board members, I mean, we haven't, some cities, as you can see from even the Scott County chart, is kind of dipping into the pot. We're actually saying, if you come here and you invest, we're going to rebate back whatever new proportional value you generate. So on KEB, they're already paying us on their existing 88,000 square foot facility. You all only abated the new building that's under construction. And on Cherney, you only abated the city portion. They're still paying 100% of the county, school district, all this rest. And on the commercial side, the school district, I had a really good discussion with the superintendent. I mean, that state tax, the 50% roughly commercial pays, that's what's really going back into the school districts. It's not really their taxes. And when we do those abatements and TIFs, even if they do a special thing, it goes on top of that. They don't get excused from having to pay that. So they're pretty comfortable in this discussion. I mean, it really doesn't put a big impact on them. And so right now, the 2 deals you've done has just been the city's portion. And it's new revenue, and we've been able to keep the old revenue, for instance, from KEB. So there was no negative impact on the taxpayers.
I'm pretty more specific on the comments that I have. On the business policy, number 2, bullet note number 3, it talks about the head of household job creation, and I'm not really sure what that means. And I agree with you. I don't think a dollar amount is really a good thing to have in the policy. I'd rather see a percentage also. I calculated out this $20 an hour average, and I came up with $43,200, and that's less than what it takes to qualify for workforce housing. I think it was a little bit higher than that. I think I calculated out like $24 an hour. So I would like to see a percentage of like the average wage that's paid in Shakopee. I don't know what that is. But a percentage would also mean that you can have it carry forward year to year. You wouldn't get stuck with a $20 an hour for 5 years. It could be something that's always fluid and always changing. Let's see, bullet number, I noticed that you took out the SAC credits comments, and I was wondering what we're gonna do with that. Because I think we still have some of those funds left, and how are we gonna account for that?
Mr. President and board members, so Nate's not here tonight, but I think Darren had told me we had about $100,000 left in that account. So that really weren't true credits. It was money that the council/EDA used to buy down the SAC credits. So it was actually a cash money in the bank that was given to us to buy down those credits. It wasn't like a bucket of actual credits. So as that number goes up, theoretically, the credits would actually go down. So there's about $100,000 left in that account.
Okay. All right. And it talks about commercial, I can't find it now. It talks about a redevelopment fund. And I can't find it now. But I looked at it. It was the Commercial Exterior Improvement Program. And I looked at the facade loan program, and that's what it's called now, is the facade loan program, so it should be changed.
Yep.
And then I agree that the housing should be separated out and looked at separately. I think there's a lot of new options that are available for housing that are not included in here. So I'd like to see that addressed separately.
Mr. Morris?
Mr. President, I know that for our current policy, there's a marker of dollars per hour for a job, and I know this board has increased that in the last 3 years. And I know we've had a discussion about increasing it even more. But you're saying maybe the philosophy should change to a percentage of something, right?
Mr. President, board members, so we looked at it. It's been as low as $14 an hour, so that was Sanmar.
Yeah.
Wasn't here, don't know what the discussion was about that, but that's kind of where we are. We've been trying to push it up, and I think what we try to do is, first off, look that if you're not in whatever the categories we come back to you with or recommend, you probably wouldn't qualify.
Go back to your last slide. So, Mr. President, the idea here, though, is to afford an average house. There's a lot more to affording a house than in buying a house than just straight income. It relies on credit, which takes in your debt aspect. Also, like you had mentioned here, the down payment, how are they gonna get that? I mean,
So, Mr. President, board member, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to pick a number, so you either have to pick the 56,000 plus number that the state currently has for the average income here for a job, or you pick what it really costs to live in Shakopee and peg it. And that's why we talked about, is it a midpoint instead of an average, so that we get a lot more people, at least to one side, that won't be housing challenged.
Right. Well, we live in a world where there's, for the most part, two-income families, and if someone were to be at one of our lower jobs at $17, $18 an hour, and I can't afford a house, well, that income doesn't qualify for that, right? But if it was a family and they were married and their partner had a job at roughly that same level or higher, you combine the two, now you have a opportunity to step in and buy a house on an affordable or a lower priced house as a starter home, right? Are we trying to factor that in? Because with your second slide here, you're talking about the average industrial wage of 56. That's one person, right? Is this, when you show this, is this based off of two income or?
This goes back to Councilmember Brennan, when you all did this policy, I think it started back in 13 or 14, you talked about the head of household. I think we're looking at all household income. So it doesn't matter who makes it, someone's making $65,000.
Right.
So the combined income, I think our goal here is if you're gonna provide some level of subsidy, whatever it is, people should be pretty close to be able to live in the community to start that subsidy discussion.
Okay. And then how to get there,
Yeah, I mean, I think we need that. So here's all the people looking potentially here. We need to get that funnel down. So it's really the jobs that are high in wages, high in benefits. They're going to stay here a long time. They're making a big investment in a building so that it raises your tax roll. I mean, it needs to add up to some pretty substantial numbers.
Thank you.
Mr. Lehman?
President, and I think your wife's example makes the point. I mean, if your benefits are extremely well, that's dollars that the household normally wouldn't be putting out, which frees up other dollars to go toward housing. So I think that should be taken into consideration.
That's the rare egg, I think, though, but yeah.
It is rare, but if a company comes forward and has this great benefit package and the wage is right on the edge of what we're looking for, you do have to take that benefit package into consideration, considering that it lasts the duration of any kind of assistance.
And Mr. President and board members, that's a really good case in point, so that we've been interviewing, we have like 14 interviews this week. Some of the people working right now, I mean, they're paying between $500 and $1,000 a month for insurance. So if a company came in and said, well, you know what, we don't charge our employees for that, that actually is money going back to their bottom line. And if they don't have to pay any out of pocket, that's even more money. Or if they're giving them an HSA and they're funding 100% of that HSA, I mean, it all adds up. And it's that bucket where we need to look at the whole bucket.
Right.
Which, Mr. President, which is now a service that County Social Services, if they do qualify, doesn't have to provide with tax dollars because it's being provided by the employer.
And I think Cherney, when the representatives were here, they're at $9 plus change in benefits outside of the wage. So that's, I think it's health, dental, and prescriptions. So I mean, that's pretty decent. If you're paying someone $23 an hour, which is their average, plus another $9 in benefits, that's a pretty substantial benefit.
Right.
And they have profit sharing.
Yeah.
More discussion? Any comments for staff?
So, Mr. President, board members, per the city administrator direction, we'll be back to you after we make some changes and do a little bit more digging with some ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is the EDA bill list for your perusal, if you have any questions on that. Otherwise, item 6. Mr. Lehman?
Motion to adjourn to Tuesday, April 7th.
Motion, and a second by Ms. Brennan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Reconvene the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for March 4th. Back to order. We completed our EDA items, and We are on 9A1, which is appointment to the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission. And we have a spokesman person for the subcommittee, Counselor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I would like to thank all of the candidates who came forward to all the different boards and commissions. We had quite a bit of people show up, a lot of interest, especially in the public utilities spot. But first off, I would think we need to take care of the issue of our statutory right to put a council member on that board. And I think I would like to make a motion that we do that. And I would like to move that we put Councilmember Brennan on the Public Utilities Commission.
Okay, a motion on the table,
A second.
second for discussion. I want to open it up for discussion. Counselor Lehman.
Well, I think the intention of the utility being created and moved separate from the city was intentional to have the city and political influence removed from it. So what you're asking is to put that influence back into it. And I just don't think that's a good idea.
We have had council members serve on that board that sat on this council. I'm one of them. I think Terry Yost served on that board as well, and then
Steve Clay, Deb
and
Amundson.
Bob Sweeney. We were talking about having a council member serve as a sitting member of the board, right?
Yeah, I don't recall a voting member.
Huh?
I don't recall a voting member of city council sitting on that board voting on the utilities at the same time.
I was one, Terry Yost was another, and Bob Sweeney was another one in my lifetime.
You were on a city council and the utility at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
When was that?
When I got elected the second time around, 2016. It was for 3 months.
Okay.
The city attorney.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just to keep it procedurally straight here, I think the better way to make this motion is just have a motion to have a council member on it so we can get the sense of the council, and then you can just, when you do the resolution, you can insert Councilmember Brennan's name at that time. So just, I think what you want is a sense that the council wants.
Two separate
Sure.
things.
Yeah, so this is so rather than appointing Councilmember Brennan with this motion, this is just a motion to have a council member be appointed to the commission.
I will amend my motion.
Two.
I will also.
And that's acceptable to the second?
Yep.
So then the discussion right now on the table is just to have the discussion about having a council member on the Shakopee Public Utilities Board. Councilor Brennan?
I think that we would need to amend the resolution if we did that, to state that the term would end at the end of the term of the city council, and that the open seat would be filled in the first meeting following the elections of the council by vote.
I would,
We can address that when we get to the resolution.
yeah.
Well, I think it is a right, and always has been, by agreement somewhere, by state statute or by resolution of the city, it's a right, and I think it has happened in the past, and it is just one member from that, and actually, in other communities, when they have their utility in-house, their city council, or a portion of it, works and takes action on their utility aspects. I understand we're not in-house, but it's not unusual. Councilor Whiting?
Thank you. You know, I think this is special circumstances. We've had a lot of issues, a lot of back and forth, communication. It's our right to place people on that board. It's our right, statutory right, to have a council member on that board. If not now, then when would we do it? I think this is the time where we need to try and encourage as much communication and opportunity as we can.
Okay. Others? Motion on the table and a second to approve that we would have a sitting council member on the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1. All right. Counselor Whiting.
You want to add the part about placing the council member on there, or?
Yeah.
All right, I would make a motion that we appoint Councilmember Brennan to the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission.
Second?
Oh, wait.
Mr. Mayor, there's a resolution in your packet, Resolution 2020-023, that has, what my suggestion would be is, it's already filled in with respect to 1, and number 2 is blank. So I think you would move that
Oh,
resolution
use the resolution.
and just fill in the blank of the council member you want to appoint,
All right.
and whatever other conditions.
So, motion maker,
Approve Resolution R 2020-023, a resolution appointing individuals to the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission.
I have a motion.
Inserting Councilmember Brennan's name in number 2.
Yes,
And
inserting
the term of that
council
one is 3 years.
for the 3-year term expiring would be 2023. Yeah.
Okay, second?
Second?
All right, discussion, I guess I have a discussion point on, I don't have a problem with appointing a city council member to the utility board, but with just ask out that if Jody Brennan's name is mentioned, that's something that you want to do.
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion, Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, our interview policy under item H says if the interview committee does not agree on a candidate to forward to the council for a particular board or commission, all candidates for that board or commission should be forwarded to the city council for selection and approval. The appointment committee did not agree on the candidate listed in the resolution, so all candidates should have been brought forward according to our own policy under H. And that's not the case, and we don't even have a listing of who all the candidates were. I know that Steve Clay re-upped, interviewed, and even though I don't agree with him 100% on political philosophy, this person is well-respected throughout the community. He's smart. He's educated on the topic. He did serve some time there. He filled in for an open seat. It wasn't multiple terms or anything. And I can't find a reason why I can't find a reason to speak against him being reappointed.
Well, we weren't on the subcommittee, but let's break this up a little bit. And I believe our policy's been rewritten and upgraded because of issues in the past. Mr. Reynolds.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, and this particular paragraph was put in specifically when we did not have 3 members on the commission for whatever reason. If you have 2 members and the 2 members do not agree, then the interview committee does not agree. But much like a city council, if you have 4 or 5 members and you have a vote of 4 to 1, the city council still approves. So it's not correct to suggest that H somehow, by saying if the interview committee does not agree with candidates, quite literally, if 2 people on that committee agree, then the committee, by 2 members against 1, agrees that that's the member that should be brought forward.
So that it's by majority. I've read that policy 3 times in the last 2 weeks as well. I know for a fact that it was rewritten and tried to make it more clear. I know that just within the last 4 years, we did have a committee that could not agree. There were 2 council members that couldn't agree on this council. And yes, we had all the candidates come forward and we voted on them. I believe there was an agreement with a committee member in the minority. So that's how I've read the policy. Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, I just point out that item F defines what the interview committee is. It clearly defines it as, committee should be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council and shall consist of two council members and a vice chair, or somebody appointed in the place of the vice chair of that particular body. So F defines H.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Reynolds.
Well, by that logic, Counselor Lehman, we would need 100% of the city council to agree every time for
No.
anything to be passed.
No, you'd need the 2 council people that were appointed to the interview committee and the 1 person sitting in from whatever board or commission.
That's
what
not a correct reading of the
Well,
policy.
That's what it says. It doesn't say council, it says interview committee.
It does. It says the interview committee. Now, a committee consists of 3 people.
Yep.
If 2 votes are for a person and 1 vote is against, the committee has voted. Much like a city council that would vote on something 4-1.
Oh.
Is that not correct?
Doesn't say that. So, interpretation again.
Well, I wrote this.
Right.
I wrote this specifically because of an issue between 2 council members when there was no other person there.
So it should probably be modified to make that point in item F to say that the majority of the 3 will move something forward of the interview committee.
And if we're going to be very stickler about this, if you look at F, it says, the committee shall be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council and shall consist of 2 city council members and the vice chair of the board/commission for which applications are being made. If there is no vice chair, or if the vice chair is to be considered for reappointment as a board commission member, then a member selected by the board or commission in question shall sit on the interview committee. It does not say that if the vice chair is unavailable, that the commission, such as SPUC, has the ability to appoint another member. So if you want to be technical about it, then Mr. Myers was not even a member of the committee.
Well, I think, he was there on behalf of whoever,
But that's not what the
when
policy
a
says.
selected member of the board or commission in question shall sit on the interview committee.
But that's not
So
what the
it
policy says.
So there again, it would be another gray area that should be
It's not
corrected.
gray at all. It's very clear.
It's very gray. It says when then a member selected by the board or commission in question, the board or commission in question in this case would be the utility.
You're forgetting the first half, if you may. If there is no vice chair, or if the vice chair is to be considered for reappointment as a board commission member, then those are 2 options. There's not another option that says if the vice chair is unavailable.
So why would it say another member may be selected?
Because
So
you
in
have
your-
those
In your
2,
scenario, no other member could be selected?
as the policy is written,
No other member could
if
ever
there's
be
no
selected?
vice chair,
Yep.
or
He's up for reappointment.
if they're for reappointment, that is what the policy says.
So in that case, they would be able to have somebody else sit in, but in all other cases, it would just become 2 council members only.
That is what the policy says.
Okay. All right.
All right. Motion on the table here. Further of resolution R202023. Further discussion? Discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right. We are completed there. We are on 10A. We have our bill list for our review. Any questions on that? Seeing none, then we would move to 10B, Liaison and Administration Report. Councilmember Brennan.
I attended the interviews that we just discussed. I also attended the fire department fundraiser at Culver's on February 19th. So they did a great job, and thank you to Culver's for doing that for the fire department. I had a phone call with the new CDA commissioner for Shakopee, and that is Jeff Delbo. We were just introducing each other. We talked about his goals and as well as the economic development and housing in Shakopee. And I participated in the social media for elected official webinar that was presented by the League of Minnesota Cities. And that was very good information. It talked about what you can say in a private group setting and what you really shouldn't be saying. So I hope that other council members take an opportunity to sit in on that social media presentation. Today I toured the community center in Ice Arena, and I want to thank Jay and his staff for taking me around and talking about what they're doing there. They're always an innovative and creative group, and I really appreciate their work. I attended the meeting of housing for Minnesota Housing. We talked about how the process of applying for housing grants and the point system. And then we broke up into small groups, and my small group happened to talk about single-family solutions for affordable housing. And Michael brought up earlier the land trust topic, and we talked about land trust. I also attended the Unified Transit Committee for Scott County, and there was a presentation on BRT from Marshall Road to Highway 55, and that eventually 55 into Minneapolis. We also had a presentation on park and ride numbers and how many people are using them, and I'll have to get that out to Mr. Reynolds so that he can share with you. But it was a presentation on Marshall Road, Southbridge, and Eagle Creek, and where those people are going to and what they're doing when they're coming home and how many people are actually utilizing it. Eagle Creek is a very small number, so a lot of their numbers just weren't jiving with the other ones. So that was good. That was good. I guess that's all I have.
Do you have any, Councilmember Brennan, do you have any printed material on the social media presentation?
Yep, I do. I had got a,
If you could hand that get that to staff and we could see that, I'm interested in that.
okay.
Thank you very much. Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, the utility liaison report, the Minnesota Department of Health Sanitary Survey report inspection by the state for the water systems, found no deficiencies, passed everything. Electric operations had one outage, 7 customers, 15 minutes on the 27th of February. It was a connection issue. The forensic analysis of the switch gear that we all saw melted down. They're looking at alternatives of switches. There's another manufacturer of a different type, but they have 100 and some, so if they're gonna switch them all out, it'd be pretty expensive. They did find, they do suspect that it was possibly the gasket on the lid, because they couldn't find any problems with the lid, and the manufacturer, what was her name, something Eaton, suspects it was high moisture in the oils, so somehow it's getting in, but the lid looks fine, so it must be a gasket issue. After doing some research, they figured out that there's some newer oils on the market that have a higher tolerance for a higher level of moisture before conductivity, I guess you call it. So they're looking at that too, but they still can't test the oil in all of them until it's 59 degrees or higher based on the manufacturer's technical service bulletin. The County Road 42 undergrounding versus overhead cost analysis on the project. They decided to underground the east and the west sections, and the largest section, which is the city's decision to decide overhead or underground. They did do that analysis, and I'm sure they're gonna supply all that cost analysis to the city. I think it was 300 and some thousand underground, 100 and some thousand if they left it above ground. So if you subtract the actual cost of leaving it above ground and moving it out of the way from the cost of undergrounding is 200 some thousand or something. But they did take action to underground both sides, east and west, so I would suspect to keep the aesthetic consistent through the project, probably underground. City makes that determination, but it would be consistent to underground it. The other thing I have is a little bit of a discussion on the coronavirus. Not sure if council's aware, but in 2007, I had the, call it a luxury, I guess, to take a 8-hour course with then city administrator and then chief of police with the what was the name? Homeland Security, Emergency Management, and Minnesota Department of Health. It was an 8-hour course with a certificate specifically on pandemics. Hindsight being 2020, I'm kind of glad I took that course then when I had the opportunity. Looks like I'll be doing another 12 to 15 hours worth of training. I've been asked to participate in some tabletop exercises and some preparations for wherever this goes with the state of Minnesota and Scott County. They're going to do an operation called Operation Mini Meds, where they set up, apparently this is going to happen all across the state in various counties, and it's a preparation type guide to gauge your ability to do some of these things. I should say that the fear level should be very low right now. I know there's a lot of people that are all over the spectrum on it, but really the fear level should be low. The easiest way to prevent any type of spread is to wash your hands 20 seconds, warm water, soap and water, 60% alcohol content or higher for hand sanitizers. If somebody appears to be ill, 6 feet of separation is good. Cover your coughs and sneezes and these types of things. A lot of these things are good old-fashioned common sense. We're not seeing the kind of spread that you do in some other cultures and other countries. Why? There's a lot of different factors. I just had an update before I came to this meeting, so that's why I'm a little bit up on some of these things. But I want to rest assured to everybody in the public that between the county, the state, the federal government, and everybody else, they are more than prepared for any level that this may take, and it very well could be nothing. So sunshine is your best friend at this point. Sun does carry ultraviolet rays that do have virus-killing, what am I thinking of, characteristics.
Yeah.
So don't panic. It's only, last I would say, it's only the biggest impact is on the elderly, people with underlying health issues, usually in the elderly age. They're not seeing a whole lot in the younger or in the healthy under 55, 60, so.
Newborns.
Did they see any of the newborns?
Newborns as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the city's preparing for, but Councilor Lehman's spot on in everything he just said in regards to it.
Do we need to make a motion to rescind any travel to like China or anything by city staff or city council?
Well, we're actually going to talk about that in a few minutes.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
So thank you, Counselor Lehman. I have a couple items. On February 20th, I met with the JC local leadership. They have a change in leadership, so the past president and the new president. They're active in the community. They're looking for volunteer events. They're looking for membership. If you're interested, contact the JCs. They're a very good organization, and I believe in the last couple of years, they've actually stepped up their game here locally and actually helped our community, and I thought that was great. On the February 25th, attended a presentation at the Shakopee Winnewacan Sioux community about some high-tech mounds that I think we will see a presentation in front of our board here over the next 30 days or so. I found it very compelling along along the riverfront from Heber Park all the way past the landing. On February 26th, I got cordially invited to be a judge at the Cross of Peace Church for a chili cook-off, and 10 great recipes, very tough to judge. Didn't want to make anybody mad, but they had a couple of real winners, and that was fun. Just the other day, on the 28th, met with the new congressional aide for Congressman Angie Craig, Julia, and actually we were talking, the first thing out of my mouth, how can I help? River capacity, river crossing capacity. So, and she's aware of the coalition.
Yep.
She came to your meeting.
Talked to her at the
Yep.
Capitol.
Also met with staff and reviewed a bunch of items of which he will talk about. Coming up for our community on March, Father-Son Nerf Derby, and that is on March 27th from 6:30 to 8. Sign up, looks like a lot of fun for the Father and Son Nerf Derby. Also on April 4th, we're gonna have our Easter egg hunt annual thing. They are looking for volunteers. It runs from 10:30 to 1:30, but if you wanna volunteer, and I do know the JCs are gonna help, and I do understand that Peter Rabbit will be making a visit there, right? The Easter Bunny is coming.
It's at Lions Park.
Lions Park this year.
Not at the community center.
That completes my liaison report. Counselor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, I had the opportunity to be in attendance for the Minnesota Valley Transit Operator of the Year, where Bo Benya was their full-time Operator of the Year, and Jennifer Tanberg was their part-time Operator of the Year. And they were each given their Operator of the Year jackets, which they proudly wear, and great to have those in our community. Actually, Jennifer is on the 495 route, which does part of Shakopee, so that's all I have.
Mayor, I have a question.
Question?
Can we get an update on how that system that they put in place to find out where your bus is at and if it's ahead of time or behind time or whatever?
The CAT AVL system.
Yeah.
I can get you an update on that.
All right.
Thank you, Counselor Whiting. And next up, our administration report. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to piggyback a little bit on what Councilor Lehman had said, the city is currently in the process of developing what is essentially a continuity of operations plan when it comes to pandemics or health issues. Obviously the city has no one on staff of any type of medical background. It's really not our role in these types of things to be in any way a part of the actual medical piece of it. However, that is, again, from the CDC at the federal level to the State Department of Health and then even Scott County. Some cities do have Department of Health, we obviously don't, but the reality is that even Scott County, if it's a real pandemic, it's not something that Scott County is going to be handling all by themselves. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming in from feds and the state. So, normally emergency management is kind of localized, meaning that the local authorities have control, because if you think about it, if it's a tornado or a flood, it's that local piece of the organization that has the ability to do something. That is not the case with pandemics. Scott County is does have a public health emergency exercise scheduled for June 17th, and Counselor Lehman will be a part of that. I will be back with the council as a whole to talk about what our plan ultimately is, but as a continuity of operations plan, we're essentially trying to figure out how we're going to continue to do the job that we're required to do. And so, part of that is that we're going to analyze what our core functions are, and then we're going to determine, as part of those core functions, what the core services are that we absolutely positively have to do. And then we're going to look at the staffing levels that it's going to take to do that. And then ultimately put a plan in place that has that all outlined. It is important to understand that, with the coronavirus, there is no cure. Essentially, all you can do for the coronavirus is take medications to get you through until the virus runs its course. So the key is prevention. And from the city standpoint, if we have an issue that's affected someone in our staff, we're going to have to think really hard about what we do and where we do it from. So as part of that, we're looking at the ability to conduct operations at off-sites. We're looking at it also from a perspective of conducting operations at home. It may be a possibility that this body will need to meet either by phone or video, which is allowed by state law. Again, we want to just have the plans in place in case something does come up. Part of the issue is that we want to make sure that our employees understand what may happen if there is an outbreak. It could be you kind of joked about restricting travel to China, but there may be some real restrictions on where we allow people to go, and there may be some loosening on our policies in regards to sick time, because the last thing we want is if somebody is not feeling well and this is here, they cannot become in contact with anybody else. And so, again, we're in the process of putting this together. I'll be back with staff with a lot more detail in the future, but I just wanted you all to know where we are in the process.
Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, before it just dawned on me that when I was talking about the impact on the elderly, I know we have the elderly at the community center, and I think that's something we need to think about and how to put up the basic information of, cover your coughs and sneezes. If you're sick, please don't come. And we'd need to talk to our staff people about disinfecting sites and stuff like this. So just a basic common sense stuff,
That's absolutely correct, and that's essentially what we will be doing, as well as, if we're required or if there's an issue, wiping down surfaces as well. The community center and Parks and Recreation in general is essentially a Tier 4 service level, which means that there really aren't a lot of core services that we have to do for Parks and Recreation. Because of the ice arena and the community center both being gathering places, it's quite possible that those could be shut down relatively quickly. We're in the process of putting a notification out to let everybody know that this could happen at some point in the future. Certainly not to spook anybody, but just to give them plenty of notice that, if something happens, these two facilities are probably going to be shut down.
More to come.
Yep, more to come.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Item number 11. I have one item in regard to obviously with the appointments today to the Shakopee Public Utilities. Then we would no longer need a liaison at that board. Counselor Lehman, there is an opportunity to take on a new liaison role to Scale, and they meet twice a month at 7 a.m. for an hour.
7 a.m.?
7:30.
7:30. The executive committee meets here,
The executive meeting meets here.
and the general meeting is the second week of the month, and that meets at the Link over by Dakota.
And they're always on Friday, so it's Friday morning.
And then there's also the RTF board that meets quarterly after the,
Regional training facility.
Can somebody
scale.
like shoot me some schedules and stuff by email or something?
We'll have staff present that up and see if you
All right.
want that.
Okay.
Any other business before this board? Seeing none, Counselor Whiting.
Motion to adjourn to Tuesday, March 17th at 7 PM.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Everybody's talking about the virus and it's in the news. Let's all be careful, let's be aware. And with that, I have a motion on the table and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, motion carries, and we are adjourned at 8:57.